They were on the streets. This morning, they were in FBI custody. And by this afternoon, they were in court.
There will be an impact.
The FBI and Chicago police joined forces, targeting 104 alleged members and associates of the traveling vice lord street gang.
Donald Lee and top associate Torrance Benson have been convicted in federal court. Lee and Benson are two of 13 people indicted in a multi-office investigation into a violent street gang on the west side. The others previously pled guilty and are awaiting their sentence.
Ronnie Fields, one of the best teammates I've ever had in my life. George's Music, all the Travelers, Baby, South Side, West Side, all the places that I learned to play. I want to thank the city of Chicago.
Everybody in my hood want to know though. Yeah, it's Jay, your boy Lil Jay. They want to know a big thing. Am I breed or TVL? Time to set the record straight. Let these niggas know I'm straight TVL. And that's my word, my word. That just came out of my mouth. And as I feel, that's what I just said. Of us don't need all that commotion and all. You don't want them problems. Yeah, we got beef right now, though.
Chicago's gang landscape is complex, historic, and deeply entrenched. And few groups have had as much reach and longevity as the traveling vice lords. Born out of the larger vice lord nation in the 1960s, the traveling vice lords carved out their own identity through adaptability, expansion, and calculated aggression. From their origins in East Garfield Park under the early leadership of Ugly Frank to their eventual sprawl across the west and south sides of Chicago, the traveling vice lords grew into one of the most formidable factions in the city. Unlike many street gangs that remained locked in small territorial pockets, the traveling vice lords prided themselves on their ability to move, to travel, and to assert dominance wherever opportunity arose. Over time, dozens of traveling vice lords sets formed, each with its own leadership, conflicts, and legacy. Some, like WickedTown and 4 Block, became synonymous with violence and federal indictments. Others, like JohnnyMob and TMK, were known more for their music, community ties, or specific block affiliations. This video explores the roots of the traveling vice lords, highlights their most notable sets, and reveals how they've shaped and been shaped by the city of Chicago for more than half a century.
There is no mistaking the police presence today at Laramie and Adams on the west side. Marked and unmarked squads are either sitting or constantly cruising by. A little over a month ago, this was an open-air drug market with, police say, $7,000 a day in sales. After a series of controlled buys, police made 15 arrests, and by their presence now wish to send a message, no more drugs here. They did the same with another gang in the Lawndale neighborhood, even more arrests, some on federal charges.
What we're going to do different is those locations where those markets existed are not going to be returned to those narcotics dealers. That's why we're standing here today.
Of local police and the FBI. More than 100 suspected gang members are arrested on the city's west side. This is an investigation that started about 2.5 years ago.
And it involves secret wiretaps that were placed on the phones of the gang members. ABC 7's Ben Bradley was at the court appearance of many of those suspects and joins us with more details. Ben.
Linda Allen, for more than 2 years, as members of this street gang allegedly sold drugs on the west side, FBI agents and Chicago police officers were listening, watching, and recording, building a case that they hope will cripple one of Chicago's biggest and best-known gangs.
Last night they were on the streets. This morning they were in FBI custody. And by this afternoon they were in court.
There will be.
The traveling vice lords emerged as a distinct faction in 1964, during a period when the broader vice lords organization began to split into smaller, independent sets. The original foundation of the traveling vice lords is often attributed to a man known as Ugly Frank, whose early leadership anchored the group in the East Garfield Park neighborhood of Chicago. While some accounts mistakenly label King Neil Wallace as the founder, Wallace actually rose to prominence after Ugly Frank had stepped away from the scene by the early 1970s. Though not the originator, King Neil was instrumental in shaping the identity and growth of the traveling vice lords, and is often considered a co-founder due to his influence and leadership. By 1970, the traveling vice lords began expanding aggressively beyond their East Garfield Park base. One of their most strategic moves was infiltrating the Austin neighborhood, where they successfully persuaded members of the unknown vice lords to switch allegiances and join the traveling vice lords. Their ambition didn't stop there. In collaboration with elements from the Cicero vice lords, they helped form a hybrid faction known as the Cicero Traveling Vice Lords. However, the faction seemingly disbanded soon after the leader was arrested and charged in the June 1970 deletion of a Cicero police lieutenant's son. That incident likely derailed any further development of the branch. Despite that setback, the traveling vice lords surged in influence and numbers during the 1970s. They became one of the most dominant vice lord sets in the city, arguably ranking among the top 3 largest factions. Their presence grew especially strong across the west side, where they gained territory in West Garfield Park and spread into several public housing developments. Notably, they took root in the Henry Horner Homes, Abiela Homes, and Rockwell Gardens, where they operated alongside other vice lord sets. These densely populated housing projects became critical zones for TVL influence and operations. The death of King Neil in 1983 did not slow the group's momentum. On the contrary, the 1980s marked a new era of growth. The traveling vice lords expanded their presence into Chicago's South Side, especially the Outgeld Gardens housing projects in the Riverdale area and the Roseland neighborhood, including the notorious Wild Hundreds. One of the defining traits of the traveling vice lords was their adaptability. They were known for moving fluidly between neighborhoods, or even states, when opportunities presented themselves. The traveling vice lords could forge alliances and business partnerships with other gangs or factions when it benefited their operations. Yet they were quick to respond with lethal force when conflict arose. Their territorial reach and flexibility helped establish them as a dangerous and profitable criminal enterprise. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, the traveling vice lords developed lucrative drug markets, especially in the public housing projects where they solidified their power through violence. These drug operations often ignited deadly turf wars with rival gangs vying for control of the same buildings. As the traveling vice lords continued to grow in size and influence, their reach extended well beyond Chicago. By the late 20th century, the organization had established significant operations in other states, including cities like Memphis, Tennessee, and parts of North Carolina, where they built large and profitable footholds. Over time, several breakaway factions emerged from the main TVL body. Among them were the maniac traveling vice lords and the outlaw lunatic traveling vice lords. However, these offshoots did not appear until the 2000s, placing them outside the scope of this historical focus, which centers on developments up to 1999. Both sets have since become inactive. Throughout their history, the traveling vice lords have engaged in ongoing violent conflict with the conservative vice lords, another prominent vice lord faction. This rivalry has contributed to some of the most intense internal warfare within the broader vice lord nation.
Gang leader Donald Lee and top associate Torrance Benson have been convicted in federal court. Lee and Benson are 2 of 13 people indicted in a multi-office investigation into a violent street gang on the west side. The others previously pled guilty and are awaiting their sentencing. U.S. Attorney John Lausch Jr. says the evidence revealed the extent of the violence the gang carried out to protect their drug trafficking operation, including 19 attempted.
We need to hold people accountable for the violent crimes they're committing in the city of Chicago.
At 5, a federal jury convicting a gang leader for 6 in Chicago. Donald Little Don Lee was the head of the WickedTown street gang. Today's verdict comes after a 2-month racketeering trial.
Like a lot of cases, this started small. It started with drug buys and wiretaps and looking at drug trafficking on the west side of Chicago.
In November 2022, a federal jury delivered guilty verdicts against two high-ranking members of one of Chicago's most violent street gangs. Donald Lil Don Lee and Torrance Blackie Benson, reputed leaders of the WickedTown faction of the traveling vice lords, were convicted on federal racketeering and firearms charges following a 2-month trial that laid bare a decades-long reign of terror across Chicago's west side. Operating primarily in the Austin neighborhood, WickedTown built its reputation through relentless violence, drug trafficking, and intimidation. According to federal prosecutors, from July 2000 through August 2020, the faction was responsible for at least 19 deletions and 19 attempted deletions, often targeting rivals, suspected informants, or anyone perceived as a threat to the gang's operations. Witnesses during the trial described a culture of fear, where victims and their families were routinely threatened to remain silent. The gang even glorified its violence on social media, using platforms to showcase firearms, intimidate enemies, and celebrate murders. Prosecutors laid out a chilling case. Evidence showed that Donald Lee personally committed 3 deletions and provided weapons used in 3 others. Torrance Benson was tied to 1 deletion and 3 attempted deletions. The jury determined that many of these acts were cold, calculated, and premeditated. A key witness, Deshaun Morgan, a former gang member who pleaded guilty and turned informant, testified about his involvement in the 2018 double deletion of Donald Holmes Jr. and Diane Taylor. According to Morgan, he ordered the hit believing Holmes had cooperated with law enforcement. The executions were carried out by fellow members Jarius Scudder, Murphy, and Demond Looney Brown, who were later recorded bragging about the deletions, critical evidence that helped secure convictions. Donald Lee faces a mandatory life sentence, while Benson also faces the possibility of life in prison. Sentencing hearings have not yet been scheduled. This high-profile case marks a significant milestone in the federal crackdown on gang violence in Chicago. The investigation, a collaborative effort between the ATF, the Chicago Police Department, and federal prosecutors, led to the seizures. The convictions of Lee and Benson represent more than just a courtroom victory. They mark a turning point in the ongoing struggle to dismantle deeply entrenched gang networks that have long plagued neighborhoods like Austin. Authorities hope the takedown of WickedTown's leadership will help reduce retaliatory violence and open the door for meaningful community rebuilding. JoeGang is a traveling vice lord set based in Chicago's Roseland neighborhood, with territory concentrated around 112th and 113th Streets near Wentworth Avenue on the city's far south side. As part of the wider vice lord nation, AeroCity maintains its own identity and leadership structure while operating within the vice lord umbrella. The set has established itself with a strong street presence and is known for defending its turf through violence and retaliation. One of the most recognized figures from AeroCity is local rapper Say Less Baby Jew, who represents the set in his lyrics. His music reflects the tensions, loyalty, and identity tied to life in the neighborhood. 4 Block, also known as MVP, is a traveling vice lord set based around 104th Street and Aberdeen on Chicago's south side. The MVP set was established in the 1980s, during a period when the traveling vice lords began expanding their presence into the hundreds, a nickname for the far south side blocks numbered in the 100s. The set's name, MVP, often stands for Most Valuable Players, reflecting pride in their roots and influence. HobMob, also known as 1400, is a traveling vice lord set named in memory of a fallen member known as Hob, who met his demise in 2010. The gang adopted his name as a tribute, solidifying their identity around his legacy. Based on the south side of Chicago, HobMob has developed a reputation for being active and aggressive, especially in local conflicts.
To the Rollie, man, we thought that was dead. This one, nothing.
Niggas hoods be 3 blocks and shit, talking about they want to beef and shit.
Once that belt come off, that belt coming out. Don't come over here shooting, bro. We gonna tail ass up, man.
We bang L for Baby Lou and Googie, man, big man.
Founded by Ugly Frank at the corner of California and Lexington in East Garfield, TTU-CaliMob is a traveling vice lord set known as Two Turned Up. The group maintains strong ties with other TVL sets in the area, but is actively at war with various gangster disciple factions across the west side. Known for their aggressive presence and loyalty to TVL structure, TTU has also made a name in music through artists like Shorty Drew and Team TTU. Based around 13th and Springfield, JohnnyMob 1300 is known on the west side of Chicago. The set is associated with fallen rapper Johnny Boy the Prince R.I.P. and Lil Mo 1300, both of whom represent the neighborhood in their music.
J-Block. This J-Block right here. This J-Block. This J-Block right here. Real J-Block. Look at this one right here. Right here. Ready?
Oh, this the block right here.
Based around Jackson and Western, J-Dubb, also known as RollieMobb, is a traveling vice lord set rooted in the 2515 buildings of the Rockwell projects. WickedTown is a long-standing traveling vice lord set based primarily around Ohio and Leamington, with a presence also at Huron and Leamington. Active since the 1980s, this crew has been a fixture in their west side neighborhood for decades. Also known as Rustworld, is a traveling vice lord set based primarily around Huron and Cicero on Chicago's west side. They also hold ground at Huron and Kilpatrick and Huron and Lamont. Active since the 1990s, RollieGang has lost members such as Rusty and Loss over the years. The crew is known for its ties to the local music scene, with rapper Shotty Doo representing the set. Also known as Dope Boys or Blood Gang. BTBG, WBMG is a traveling vice lord set based in West Humboldt Park. Their main territory centers around Chicago Avenue and St. Louis, with notable presence at Huron and St. Louis and Ohio and St. Louis. Over the years, the set has lost several members. BTBG is musically represented by artists K.E. Jiggy and Otto. This traveling vice lord set is based out of the Academy Square apartments near Jackson and Throop, known simply as 300, located around Iowa and Kildare. Suwoo is a traveling vice lord set that's closely allied with Jeff Gang. They share deep ties and often move together, especially in conflicts. Suwoo is actively opposed to various 4 affiliated sets in the surrounding area, making them a key player in the local street dynamics. Based around 15th Street and Ridgeway, WayWayGang is a traveling vice lord set known for holding down territory in this part of the west side. The Harrison Boys, also known as Smarty World, are a traveling vice lord set originating from the Harrison Courts housing complex. They are recognized for their presence and influence within this west side territory. Short for Straight Out of Albany, is a traveling vice lord set located at Lexington and Albany in East Garfield Park. Known for their close ties to other TVL hoods in the area, this set emphasizes internal unity and alliance building across East Garfield. No Compassion, Ruthless Behavior is a traveling vice lord set based around Polk and Spaulding. While not as publicly visible, the crew maintains a presence in the area and holds down their turf. Located at Wabansia and Lamont, the 4800 set is another TVL-affiliated crew operating in Chicago's west side. Based around Augusta and Springfield, Heavy Camp, also known as 1000, represents a traveling vice lord set with roots in the west side. Known as Tony Mob Crosby, is a traveling vice lord set based around Harrison and Western. Rapper and dancer I Am D-Lo hails from this set, bringing visibility to the crew through his music and performances. Toontown is a traveling Vice Lord set based at Polk and Cicero, located around Huron and Troy. Cheddar Boys 600 is a TVL-affiliated crew known for pushing influence through both music and street presence. Based at Chicago and Christiana, TTU-CaliMob is a traveling Vice Lord set with strong roots in its block. Money Gang Mafia is a traveling Vice Lord set based around Ohio and Kedzie, known for its street presence and musical influence. This crew is represented by rappers C-Money and J9, who use their platform to highlight life in the neighborhood. Located around Carroll and Pulaski, 4100 is a West Side traveling Vice Lord set with deep roots in the area. This traveling Vice Lord faction operates around Sacramento and Fulton, known as 2900. SpauldingBoys represent the traveling Vice Lords at Ohio and Spaulding.
Top of the key right here. You see that in the maypole, top of the key.
Be on homework on us having the smallest crowd, but still get way out through this bitch. We ain't clicked over nobody, like nobody. Like this shit, we us, by ourselves. We ain't clicked over nobody, none of that. That's why this shit started at, for real. Do your homework on them project buildings being right here. They don't know about them project buildings, though.
We really, Henry Hornets, OD, Double H. And we used to do this bitch, doing a lot of shit. Breaking in school, all type of shit. See, we fucking in school right here. Look, that shit on the ground, TVL, OD.
Based on Hoyne in Maypole in the near West Side, Duke Mob is a prominent traveling Vice Lord set. Musically, they're represented by Duke Boys Saw, Dolph Street Greedy, and 500, voices that reflect the crew's experience and perspective through drill and street anthems. Waller 700 is a traveling Vice Lord set based around Huron and Waller. The crew has a long-standing presence in the area, representing the traveling Vice Lord nation with local roots and deep ties to the surrounding blocks. DrizzyGang, also known as West Mob Gang, operates out of Augusta and St. Louis. The story of the traveling Vice Lords is one of survival, ambition, and brutal evolution. What began as a splinter group in the 1960s became a sprawling network of independently operated sets stretching across Chicago and beyond. Whether through deadly turf wars, federal racketeering charges, or viral drill music, the TVLs have remained a force, adapting to every wave of law enforcement pressure and community change. Some factions have faded into obscurity. Others, like WickedTown and TTU-CaliMob, have left a lasting mark through both violence and cultural influence. The sets still active today continue to reflect the challenges of Chicago's inner-city neighborhoods, where loyalty, territory, and identity often intersect with crime, poverty, and systemic neglect. Understanding the traveling Vice Lords isn't just about tracking gang names and blocks. It's about understanding the long-term effects of disinvestment, incarceration, and community fragmentation. These sets didn't just pop up. They grew from the cracks in the foundation of a broken city. And decades later, they still shape the streets they came from.